Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. It's Columbus Day and cities across the U.S. are celebrating. We bring you the nation's largest festivities and the controversies around the holiday. Travelers across the country are feeling frustrated as Southwest Airlines cancels over 2,000 flights. Today, around 10% of the airline's flights were called off. Vaccination deadlines are approaching, but the military's got a lot to go. A new report gives us a 6-digit figure. As Election Day draws closer, the Virginia Democratic candidate for governor continues to claim that critical race theory is made up. And around 20,000 athletes took part in the Boston Marathon today. Kenyans dominated the podium in both the men's and the women's races. It's Columbus Day. Italians, Americans, and many more are celebrating together. NTD's Arian Pazdar brings us to the nation's largest parade in New York City.
The governor of New York, along with the organizer of the parade, kicked it off and marched right at the front. The weather played along perfectly and vibes were great, as dozens of groups marched along Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Lots of Italian flags, Italian music, and of course, happy people. Guys, how are you feeling today?
We're feeling amazing! Yeah, Forza Italia! Today is a beautiful day, guys.
So, what exactly does Columbus Day stand for?
This parade was put in place to try and celebrate Italian-American culture so that Italian-Americans would be proud of their history.
And sure enough, Italians did celebrate their culture with all their energy. They had Italian party songs, classic Italian cars, and of course, Italian snacks. One attendee explained why it's great to be Italian.
How many accomplishments the Italians do? Every day you wake up Italian, you eat, you drive Italian, you dress Italian. It's great to be Italian.
Maybe not everyone drives Italian, but many do appreciate Italian sports cars which took part in the parade. Besides appreciating Italian culture, first responders remembered the ones who died on 9/11 by showing banners with their faces. That didn't dampen the festive spirit, however. The fire department and many more celebrated and marched together. In Italy, there's no Columbus Day. An Italian attendee said he loves to celebrate America's freedoms and come together on Columbus Day.
Quindi questo è bello, vedere la libertà, essere liberi, stare insieme.
Columbus Day festivities kicked off on Friday and Monday's parade concluded the Italian weekend. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
And in California, San Francisco's annual Italian Heritage Parade returned in person on Sunday. We hear more from NTD's Cynthia Kai.
Colorful floats, lively dancers, and marching bands made their way from San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf to Washington Square Park. The annual Italian Heritage Parade, originally called the Columbus Day Parade, returned in person to celebrate and honor the accomplishments of the Italian community. This year marks its 153rd anniversary. Event organizers say it's the longest-running annual Italian Heritage Parade in the U.S.
We have 85 entries in the parade this year, which actually is more than I expected, and everybody's just thrilled to be here.
Those participating in the parade say it's good to be back, showcasing their passion.
It brings back memories, I guess, for my family back home in Italy, and being a native San Franciscan. Thank you. Yeah.
What I represent is those who have gone before me, who have given the ultimate sacrifice, those who are servicing now, and those who are going to be servicing in the future.
After last year's virtual celebration due to the pandemic, onlookers agree it's great to be back to participate in the festivities in person this year.
Super excited to be here. Lots of really good displays of Italian culture and patriotism. It's awesome.
He's loving it. It's been fun and it's exciting, and yeah, he's a good sport and he's an amazing dog. So yeah, it's just a fun day in the city. It's a beautiful day in the city.
San Francisco's Italian community hosts the parade every year as part of the 3-day-long Italian Heritage Festival. Festivities included a block party, a bazaar, and of course, the parade. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
And in Philadelphia, this year's Columbus Day was also changed to Italian American Day. The statue of Christopher Columbus remains boarded up with plywood, but many still came out to celebrate the Italian explorer. NTD's Jason Perry has that story.
Many people came out to see the Italian American Day parade in Philadelphia, with Saturday Night Live alumni Joe Piscopo also participating in the festivities. Marching bands and people dressed in traditional Italian clothing all celebrated Italian heritage. But the statue of Christopher Columbus remains boarded up, and Philadelphia residents have mixed opinions about it.
So the statue belongs here. Those boards have to come down. Millions and millions of people want that up there for a few hundred that don't like it.
If you oppose something that the minority want, you're no good. You're nefarious. You're wicked. But that's not the way it is. This is a melting pot. This is a melting pot. Everyone's going to have different opinions, and we're a little bit too sensitive.
The Columbus statue was boarded up last year after an armed group of people said to be protecting the statue stood in the way of protesters demanding the statue to be taken down. Judge Paula Patrick ruled Friday that the wooden box should be removed. But shortly after, the city appealed the decision and said taking down the boarded wall would pose a safety risk. Despite the disagreements over the statue, many still say the holiday is worth celebrating.
I'm here to join with them. I enjoy all the cultures and ethnicities of our city, all the positive things that folks have done. Everyone in America comes from someplace, and they have a lot to be proud of.
Look, not everything that happened in the past was so pleasant or wonderful, but we're supposed to learn from it, and this is how we become a better society and a better outlook on life. We don't just forget about it, we learn from it.
The boarded structure will remain around the Columbus statue until the battle is settled in court. Jason Perry, NTD News.
At least 2 people are believed to have been killed when a small aircraft crashed near San Diego today. It came down in a neighborhood in Santee, California, destroying 2 homes and damaging a third. The city's fire department battalion chief said authorities did not yet know how many people were on board, and they believed the injuries were non-survivable. At least 2 people were taken to the hospital. The Santana High School, located some 3 blocks from the crash, said on Twitter that all its students were secure. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department said a few streets were closed due to the crash. They added that the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation Safety Board would be investigating the incident. The Boston Marathon is back after being absent for 30 months due to the pandemic. Kenyans won both the men's and the women's races. Let's take a look at today's race.
The Boston Marathon was replaced with several virtual events last year, and this year it was postponed from the spring for the first time in its 125-year history. Organizers put in place COVID-19 protocols for athletes and required spectators to social distance.
Now this year, the race is smaller. We've had to reduce the size to 20,000. Normally it's 31,500. So that economic impact will not be as great. But it will never be more welcome than this year for businesses, for the hospitality industry that has so suffered from this pandemic.
Benson Kipruto from Kenya won the men's race. He ran the 26.2-mile course in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 51 seconds. In second place was Lemi Berhanu from Ethiopia. He finished 46 seconds after Kipruto. The third and fourth place finishers are also Ethiopians. And Kenyans swept the podium in the women's race. Diana Kipyoge finished first in 2 hours, 24 minutes, and 45 seconds. The second, third, and fourth place finishers are also Kenyan athletes. Marcel Hug from Switzerland won the men's wheelchair race in 1 hour, 18 minutes, and 11 seconds. American Daniel Romanchik finished second. Manuela Schar, another racer from Switzerland, won the women's wheelchair in 1 hour, 35 minutes, and 21 seconds. Americans Tatiana McFadden and Yen Hoang finished second and third.
After canceling hundreds of flights over the weekend, Southwest Airlines canceled an additional 360 flights today, and over 600 other flights were delayed. But the company plans to resume normal service this week.
Southwest Airlines canceled more than 2,200 flights over the weekend. According to flight tracker FlightAware, this includes more than 800 flights canceled on Saturday and over 1,100 on Sunday. The airline blames air traffic control issues and disruptive weather, but the president of the Southwest Airlines Pilots Association says inefficient scheduling is to blame.
But our pilots are there picking up time, working on their days off, and are doing everything they possibly can. But until the company corrects some of these issues with how they schedule and reroute pilots, flight attendants, then we're going to continue to see the same issue next week and over the holidays, and that's what we want to see avoided.
The Federal Aviation Administration said on Sunday they hadn't had air traffic staffing shortages since Friday, and that some airlines continue to experience scheduling challenges due to aircraft and crews being out of place. Long lines formed at airports across the country as frustrated passengers tried to make alternate arrangements.
My daughter was up packing at midnight, and we found out that our flight was canceled. We both got a text.
I started looking through, and there's just nothing.
When I'll get there, I don't know.
My concern is we had no explanation really that was, I feel, very legitimate or believable. And the weather and the traffic controllers, I don't think, were the real issue. And so we're frustrated. I'm missing a day of work.
Southwest has the highest cancellation rate at 28%. According to FlightAware, Allegiant canceled 5% of its flights and Spirit canceled 4% of its flights on Sunday. American Airlines canceled 2% of its flights. Southwest declined to comment on whether cancellations were due to staffing shortages related to its COVID-19 vaccine mandate for employees. The Southwest Airlines Pilots Association has filed for a temporary restraining order against the mandate, but said that the legal motion was unrelated to the cancellations and delays.
Many U.S. service members will have to roll up their sleeves before December. They have some time, but a report says the military's got a 6-digit number of unvaccinated personnel. Here's NTD's Miguel Moreno with more on that report.
The Washington Post reports that hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops are unvaccinated. They base this analysis on data they attribute to the Department of Defense. By November 28th, active duty personnel in the Navy and Marine Corps must be fully vaccinated. According to the Post, 90% of the Navy is good to go, but only 72% of the Marine Corps is. Most branches have different deadlines. The Marine Corps Reserves, for example, have until the 28th of December, and they have the smallest number of full vaccinations, 38%. The Pentagon hasn't gotten back to us. Troops who refuse to get vaccinated could be punished by being discharged or relieved of their duties. It's unclear if non-compliant troops will be discharged honorably or dishonorably. Republican lawmakers have introduced a measure to ban the military from dishonorably discharging military personnel for turning down the COVID-19 vaccine. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
As you know, many Americans have come down with COVID-19, recovered, and generated natural immunity to the virus. Question is, should vaccine mandates apply to them? Recently, a federal judge ruled in favor of a Michigan university's mandate. Immunity or not, they say the staff need to get vaccinated. More from NTD's Miguel Moreno.
An employee at Michigan State University, known as MSU, has sued the school over its COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Gina Norris, a COVID survivor, claims she has natural immunity, but the university's policy wants her vaccinated anyway. Over the weekend, a federal judge denied her request to block the school's mandate. Norris now faces termination. Her lawyer, Jen Eunice, tells me they argued that their client would suffer irreparable harm if the mandate stood in place, partly because Norris, who has natural immunity, could suffer from an adverse reaction.
So we're arguing that people with natural immunity should not be subject to MSU's vaccine mandate because the immunity that they have is as good or better as that you get from the vaccine. So it doesn't make any sense. And not only that, we have an expert who can attest that there's evidence showing that people who have natural immunity are at heightened risk of adverse effects from the vaccine.
But the judge wasn't convinced. In a court document, U.S. Judge Paul Maloney didn't mention the greater risk of adverse reactions, but gave several reasons for letting the vaccine mandate stand. He said if MSU's vaccine mandate is not enforced, the harm to others and the public could be serious, according to health officials. This factor weighs in favor of defendants. We asked MSU why they deny vaccine exemptions for those with natural and demonstrable immunity to COVID. They said they won't comment. MSU does recognize naturally acquired immunity to measles, but not to COVID. Norris's lawyer told me the federal judge's decision could be used by other judges to rule against claims similar to her clients. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Merck is asking the Food and Drug Administration to grant emergency use authorization for a new COVID-19 treatment. It's a treatment for infected persons. Merck says it can reduce the risk of hospitalization or death from COVID by 50%. That number comes from a study involving 700 patients. Merck has already sold over 1.5 million treatment courses to the U.S. government and promised to offer it at lower prices to other governments. The U.S. purchased those initial molnupiravir doses at about $700 per 5-day treatment course. It reportedly costs Merck less than $18 to produce each course. And Merck has not published full results of the trial for the pill, and other experts have said they're worried about how the pill attacks the virus. The drug embeds itself in the virus's genetic material and causes a high number of mutations. There is a risk that this could lead to long-term mutation effects, including cancer. And nearly 3 weeks before Election Day, the gubernatorial race in Virginia is tightening up. And Democratic candidate Terry McAuliffe continues to claim critical race theory is made up.
On Sunday, Terry McAuliffe, Virginia Democratic candidate for governor, repeated his claims on CNN about critical race theory, which is a hot topic in the campaign.
This is a Trump, Betsy DeVos, Glenn Youngkin plan to divide people.
As we move closer to Election Day in Virginia, the race between McAuliffe and his opponent, Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin, has also gotten closer. McAuliffe has admitted that President Biden's political woes are a drag on his campaign.
The issues are not favoring the Democrats because the timing, the focus on education, the focus on transgender education or transgender students, the focus on critical race theory, all of these issues are very emotive, very controversial.
According to the latest poll by Christopher Newport University, McAuliffe leads Youngkin among likely voters 49 to 45%, which is within the survey's 4.2% margin of error. This represents a significant tightening in the race, as McAuliffe had a 9-point lead in August. However, independent voters have shifted significantly since then.
Despite what most of the media will tell you, most people, including most Virginians, tend to favor non-democratic position. They tend to be more traditional in their views. They don't want the government telling them what their kids should or shouldn't read or learn. The parents want input, and all of this is helping Glenn Youngkin's campaign.
November 2nd will be the date for this off-year election. New Jersey and Virginia are the only two states that will hold regular gubernatorial elections this year. These races are often regarded as leading indicators for the midterm elections.
The Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded to 3 U.S.-based professors today. The Nobel Committee says their approach has revolutionized empirical research. NTD's Faye Corder has more.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has given out the Nobel Prize for Economics, this time to 3 U.S.-based recipients.
With one half to David Card for his empirical contributions to labor economics, and the other half jointly to Joshua D. Angrist and Guido W. Imbens for their methodological contributions to the analysis of causal relationships.
The winners pioneered the use of natural experiments, where individuals are exposed to conditions determined by nature rather than laboratories.
Natural experiments are everywhere. So thanks to the contributions of the laureates, we researchers are today able to answer key questions for economic and social policy.
David Card is known for a study where he found no fall in employment when the minimum wage rose.
In the area of the minimum wage, there's been just an enormous amount of research in the last 25 years. Reevaluating that evidence and thinking about it carefully and evaluating the whole thing from a more scientific view, not from an ideological point of view, I think is helpful.
The experiment took place in the 1990s when New Jersey raised the minimum wage from $4.25 per hour to $5.05 per hour. Card surveyed over 400 restaurants and found no fall in employment.
I remember seeing the research when it first came out, I believe in 1992. I was a little bit skeptical of it because it goes against what we naturally seem to think. Higher wages will lead to fewer jobs.
Michael Bussler is a professor of finance at Stockton University. He says the economy was coming out of a recession when the experiment took place, so there was an increased demand for labor. Some people also say the sample card used was not entirely random, as it focused on McDonald's, a very large corporation.
It wasn't so much necessarily the conclusions of this study, which will be debated, but the techniques he used, and from that aspect, all three of them did add significantly to the knowledge base in economics, and their contributions are now widely accepted and used.
The award comes with a cash prize of 10 million Swedish krona, which is $1.1 million US. The award has been given to 89 winners over the past 52 years, starting in 1969. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
Coming up, California's 2021 legislative season came to a close on Sunday, and the governor has signed hundreds of bills into law. A handful of bills remain controversial. And it's the annual Pumpkin Weigh-Off in Northern California. The winner this year hails from Washington State. Times Square in New York City is also called the crossroads of the world. As of late, it seems like the world-famous site is becoming more dangerous due to shootings and other crimes. A woman died after being knocked over by a mugger at Times Square on Friday. The city's police department told NTD the homeless mugger ran into the victim, a 58-year-old nurse from New Jersey, after stealing another person's cell phone. She fell onto the pavement, hitting her head and cracking her skull. Her family and friends witnessed the incident. The victim was brought to the hospital, where she was taken off life support a day later. According to reports, the suspect was on a crime spree that day. He apparently broke into another person's apartment just minutes earlier. There, he terrorized the resident and took off with $15. California's governor signed over 200 bills in the past month. The legislature is currently in recess, leaving the governor to review hundreds of bills passed by lawmakers during this legislative session. Here's NTD's Cynthia Kai with a review of the most prominent bills.
Sunday, October 10th, was the deadline for California Governor Gavin Newsom to sign any remaining bills passed by lawmakers before they left for recess back in September. A handful of these new bills were a first for California. California is now the first state with gender-neutral retail laws. AB 1084 requires retailers with 500 or more employees to sell toys and childcare products in gender-neutral sections. Along with English, science, math, and other graduation requirements, California high school students in public and charter schools soon need a full-year course in ethnic studies to graduate. AB 101 will apply starting in the 2029-2030 school year, making California the first state with this graduation requirement. California also became the first state to allow some children to add parents as dependents on health insurance plans under AB 570. California will soon ban the sale of all off-road gas-powered engines. Under AB 1346, lawn equipment, chainsaws, and even golf carts must be zero-emission. And SB 98 will now prohibit law enforcement officers from intentionally interfering with or obstructing members of the press covering protests. Press cannot be cited for failing to disperse or violating a curfew. The 2021 legislative season came to a close, and lawmakers will reconvene on January 3rd for the 2022 season. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
In Northern California, an annual Pumpkin Weigh-Off has a new winner. NTD's Eileen Ang has more on the ground with the gigantic gourds.
It's the 48th Safeway World Championship Pumpkin Weigh-Off in Half Moon Bay. The winner of this year's championship goes to Jeff Allmeyer from Olympia, Washington. His pumpkin weighed 2,191 pounds.
So I was here in 2017 and took third with a 1,927-pound pumpkin. So this is quite a jump from previous years.
He has been growing pumpkins since 2009. It's his first time winning in Half Moon Bay. Due to the pandemic last year, the event was not open to the public. This year, spectators were welcomed.
It's the granddaddy of competitions, in my opinion, Half Moon Bay. And I just enjoy coming here and seeing the crowd's amazing. Just a really supportive crowd. And the growers are really gracious and friendly, and just we all support each other. Everybody wants to win, of course, but everybody's happy for the champion. And
Leonardo Urena, a two-time champion, won second place this year. He's satisfied with the results and plans to do better next year.
My wife is one of the ones that's always supporting me. I was growing too many last year. I was growing 6, and she's like, you better listen to me. Plant less pumpkins, and then you'll do better. And then I think I'm gonna follow her advice, because I think listen to a wife, it's important.
They agree that a lot of work goes into getting the pumpkins to be that size.
You start in April, and you do a lot of plant maintenance and tending your plants, and just making sure, taking care of issues and problems, and getting the right fertilizers and soil management. There's all kinds of things. Dealing with the environment, the unknown.
We try to improve every year, and by improving is get the best seeds in the ground, the best genetics you can get, because sometimes pumpkins are big, but sometimes they're light, and we wanted to have both.
Urena will take it back for display at the winery where he works. After Thanksgiving, he will harvest the seeds and distribute them to other growers.
The first place prize money has been increased to $9 per pound. Before, it was $7 per pound. If a pumpkin breaks the world record, the owner brings home $30,000.
Second place gets $3,000, third place gets $2,500, and fourth place gets $2,000. The Most Beautiful Pumpkin Award went to Eric Carlson from Portola Valley, who took home $1,000. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
No Time to Die, the latest installment in the James Bond franchise, debuted to $56 million at the domestic box office. That's somewhat short of expectations, and it signals that even one of the most storied brands in film history has to contend with the effects of the pandemic.
Heading into its U.S. opening weekend, James Bond flick No Time to Die had a lot going for it. The hype was huge. The 25th installment of the spy thriller franchise, it marks actor Daniel Craig's final billing as the rakish secret agent. And both film critics and audiences seemed to like the flick, which scored high on ratings site Rotten Tomatoes. And atop all that was pent-up demand for a long-delayed movie that was first scheduled to hit theaters in April 2020, just as closures and health measures upended the theater world. No Time to Die was projected to pull in $60 to $70 million over its U.S. debut weekend, and it fell short. The film took in $56 million over the first 3 days. That would be cause for celebration for a lot of movies, but this is a Bond flick with a production budget of $250 million and another $100 million spent on marketing. Still, No Time to Die has already enjoyed an impressive global box office of $313 million.
Coming up, floods in a northern Chinese province have affected some 1.7 million people. Many families are homeless as floods sweep through their communities. And the Chinese regime takes another step toward more collaboration with the Taliban, making the most of the opportunity now that U.S. forces have left Afghanistan. This and more here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented My Pillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled My Pillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or My Pillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.
Floods are devastating many parts of China. In Hebei province, flooding caused a bus containing 55 people to fall from a bridge into a river. 13 have died. And in Shanxi province, floods have affected nearly 2 million people. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
13 are dead and 1 is missing after a bus accident in China. That's according to local media outlets. A bus carrying 55 people fell into a river on Monday in China's Hebei province. Heavy rainfall in the area, plus overflow released from nearby reservoirs, are being blamed for the accident. Online video from the scene shows passengers standing on top of the submerged bus, waiting for rescue. Many of them had been on their way to work. The accident struck on a bridge over the Hutuo River in Hebei. The river's water level had risen dramatically after near constant rainfall the past few days. By the time the bus tried to cross, the bridge was already half underwater. On top of that, the bridge does not have guardrails. Locals told Chinese media that the bridge is basically a section of standard road hovering over the river. Usually, river water passes beneath it. But with the river half submerging the road, it became difficult to see where the side of the road ended and the river began. The incident is getting a lot of attention on Chinese social media. The hashtag "a commuter bus carrying 51 people fell into the river in Hebei" has already racked up over 700,000 views on the microblogging platform Weibo. Hebei isn't the only part of China dealing with floods. In Shanxi province, reservoirs are also discharging overflow, prompted by heavy rain. At present, some 1.75 million people across nearly 80 counties and 11 cities in the province have been affected. In some regions, the flooding is so severe that entire villages had to be evacuated. A resident from one of those villages told the Epoch Times that authorities gave no prior warning before releasing water from a local reservoir. The floodwater reportedly entered the village at night, and residents weren't able to stop it. Many had no choice but to flee their homes with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Those who evacuated are now seeking shelter in neighboring villages and counties that didn't suffer flood damage. Online video shows many of those displaced are elderly citizens. A resident explained that locals have been on their own and without aid, from trying to block the floodwaters from entering the village to handling the necessary evacuation.
U.S. officials meet with the Taliban as the Chinese Communist Party looks to take advantage of the retreat of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Beijing hopes to implement its Belt and Road Initiative with the support of Afghanistan, despite the brutality of the Taliban regime. NTD correspondent David Vives has the details.
U.S. officials met for the first time with the Taliban on Saturday and Sunday in Doha. The talks focused on containing extremist groups in Afghanistan and evacuating U.S. citizens. The U.S. insisted the meeting did not amount to recognition of the Taliban. While U.S. relations with the Taliban remain chilly, China is taking another step closer to the new regime in Kabul. The South China Morning Post, which typically reflects the perspective of the Chinese regime, wrote today that the Taliban have matured a lot politically and that their governance is considered reasonable by the Afghan people. Emmanuel Dupuy is president of a security and military think tank in Paris. He says while the US was sending troops to Afghanistan, China has been trying to do business there for years.
2,500 American soldiers have died during 20 years of enduring freedom and the ISAF, International Stabilization Assistance Force in Afghanistan, while China was making business. Therefore, the dilemma is quite simple. China did not send troops in Afghanistan, but set its roots in Afghanistan.
He believes the Taliban's coming to power is a great opportunity for the Chinese regime as it will impact the entire East Asia region. And the retreat of US troops is an additional bonus for China.
Pakistan is now more focused on doing business and instead of doing war, instead of sustaining, training, mentoring the Taliban, which is exactly what China has always asked Pakistan to do.
The Belt and Road Initiative connecting China with Europe will benefit from China's business relationships with Afghanistan and Pakistan once it gets underway, he says.
Of course, this leads us back to the Belt and Road Initiative, where China was looking very actively to interconnect between its territory towards Turkey and of course towards Iran, and this is and will be achieved. Nevertheless, the rudeness or nevertheless the barbarity of who is in power in Kabul.
But the official recognition of the Taliban regime by Western countries, including the US, remains an important step for Afghanistan to be able to join groups like the UN or the China Cooperation Organization and be able to engage in long-term partnerships with its neighbors. David Vives, NTD News.
A French minister on the weekend said he's seen not €1 in payments from the UK. Home Secretary Priti Patel promised over £50 million to her counterpart in July to help France stop migrants from trying to cross the English Channel. Today, a Home Office minister said the delay in payment was the result of an administrative process and not political. NTD's Joy Duga takes a look.
The government will pay £54 million it promised to France to help prevent migrant crossings in the coming weeks. That's according to a Home Office minister on Monday. It came after the French Interior Minister urged Britain to fulfil its promises.
Until now, the British government has not paid what it has promised. For now, there is not €1 that has been paid by the British government following the agreement that I negotiated with Madame Patel.
Darmanin visited Dunkirk during the weekend.
Britons are people of honour, and I am certain this is a slight accounting delay, and they will keep their promise. For the past 20 years, France has held the border for our British friends.
He says French maritime authorities are now stopping 75% of migrant boats seeking to cross the Channel, and they could reach 100% if Britain provided the funds that Home Secretary Priti Patel promised to him in July. The money is meant to help fund a doubling of the number of police patrolling French beaches. Home Office Minister Damien Hines said an administrative process rather than any political question had led to the delay. He told the BBC, "I didn't say it was an error. It is a process to be worked through when you are transferring what are very large sums of taxpayers' money." In early September, Patel threatened to withhold the funds if France doesn't turn back more people. Last Friday saw 624 people reach the UK, the fourth highest daily tally on record during the current crisis. Dozens arrive here in Dungeness on the weekend. According to the Press Association news agency, since the start of the year, more than 16,000 people have succeeded in reaching the UK on board small boats. That's up from about 8,500 in 2020. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
Coming up, an Australian senior police officer quits to speak out over ethical concerns about what police officers are being made to do in Victoria. The region has heavy pandemic restrictions, and police have been given greater powers to arrest people to enforce those restrictions. And in Italy, 12 people were arrested after police clashed with protesters who are against making vaccine passes mandatory for all workers. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. And now to Italy. Police said on Sunday they have arrested 12 people, including the leaders of the far-right Forza Nuova political party. The arrests followed clashes between police and protesters on Saturday. Thousands gathered to protest against government measures set to make COVID vaccine passes mandatory for all workers from this Friday. Workers face fines up to $1,700 and employers up to $1,100 if they do not comply. Workers could also lose their jobs. NTD's Coast Tamanez brings us the details.
Thousands of people took to the streets of the Italian capital on Saturday to oppose moves to make the COVID-19 Green Pass mandatory for all workers. Under the Green Pass system, any worker who fails to present a valid health certificate from Friday will be suspended with no pay, but cannot be sacked. Prime Minister Mario Draghi introduced the pass, which many Italians see as a draconian measure that contravenes personal liberty and freedom of choice. The certificates were initially needed to enter many cultural and leisure venues, but their scope has gradually been widened. The measures are the first by a major European economy. Similarly, Italy was the first European country to implement a full-scale national lockdown back in February 2020, a measure first initiated by China, where the virus outbreak began. Some have likened the Green Pass in Italy to China's social credit rating system, whereby people who don't comply are disadvantaged and penalized. The march in Rome was authorized, but the violent clashes with police that came later were not. Italian police used water cannons and tear gas to push back hundreds of people. Some protesters tried to break past police in riot gear, guarding access to Prime Minister Mario Draghi's office. A dozen people, including members of the far-right Forza Nuova political party, were arrested following the clashes. Draghi denounced Saturday's violence and said his broad unity government remained committed to completing its vaccination campaign. The vaccine pass mandate for workers is set to remain in effect as long as Italy is in a state of emergency, which is currently until the end of the year. Costa Jimenez, NTD News.
And in Australia, a senior member of the Victoria Police Force speaks out over ethical concerns and then quits her job. Victoria has some of the strictest pandemic restrictions in the world and has been criticized for its enforcement methods. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Former Acting Senior Sergeant Crystal Mitchell was a police officer in Victoria, Australia for 16 years. On Friday night local time, she quit her job during an interview with independent news outlet Discernible.
The consequences of me being here today is that I will be resigning from Victoria Police effective the end of this interview.
Wow.
Because the consequences of me coming out publicly would be dismissal. So I'm choosing to quit, and I'm quitting because I can't remedy in my soul anymore the way in which my organisation that I love to work for is being used, and the damage that it's causing in the reputation of Victoria Police and the damage that it's causing to the community.
Mitchell was working at the Gender Equality and Inclusion Command, a job she described as the best she'd ever had, but her conscience wouldn't allow her to stay and remain silent.
All of my friends that are police officers, that are working the front line and are suffering every day, enforcing show directions that the vast majority, or certainly a great majority, don't believe in and don't want to enforce.
Victoria has had the longest lockdown in the world and some of the strictest enforcement measures. The region has a 7-day average of 1,700 CCP virus cases and 6 deaths. Under the chief health officer's orders, police have been given greater powers to arrest people. And over the last few months, videos of police aggressively enforcing pandemic measures have gone viral worldwide. Footage of officers assaulting protesters at freedom rallies have also shocked the international community. Mitchell claims the Victoria Police have lost their independence from the government. She said that in her opinion, Victoria Premier Daniel Andrews has escalated the violence between protesters and police by outlawing protesting.
And they are using divisive and maligning language about all protesters and calling protests illegal. I just think is ridiculous. The only reason that protests are illegal is because Daniel Andrews made it so.
She expressed frustration that Andrews' administration and the Victoria Police hadn't worked together to ensure people could still safely protest during the pandemic. When asked why police don't just refuse to enforce the orders, Mitchell said it's not that simple. She said police are obligated to fulfill their duties and carry out the directives until the orders are contested in court. According to Australia's 9 News, Victoria Police said in a statement that the comments in Mitchell's interview in no way reflect the views of Victoria Police. The police union said they wish her well and hope she receives the support she needs. Mitchell says she and a coalition of other officers are planning to challenge vaccine mandates in court on behalf of all authorized workers in Victoria. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
Coming up, a team of scientists is simulating life on Mars in the Israeli desert. They hope to make enough mistakes during the simulation to find any potential problems with Mars planetary living. That and more here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk hosted a county fair-style festival to celebrate the upcoming grand opening of Germany's new Tesla plant. Up to 9,000 people attended the Saturday event and were able to explore the factory and see how the electric cars are made. Here's more.
The one-day festival started at 10 a.m. Crowds waited in line that morning to see the inside of the new Tesla factory near Berlin. Tesla fans as well as local residents attended.
This day is unique. The Tesla factory in Germany will be open to the public for the first time. That is a very special day. The technology is very interesting. How the car is being built, what the actual production steps are, and to see some familiar faces from the Tesla family.
Visitors could see firsthand how the vehicles are put together. At peak performance, the factory will be able to produce 500,000 electric vehicles per year. That's more than double what Germany produced in 2020. But not everyone was happy about the plant's opening.
What you see here is really an illegal construction, because it all happened without a building permit. It is the biggest environmental disaster, what is happening here.
A consultation of public concerns towards the Tesla factory ends on October 14th, after which the local environmental ministry will decide whether to reject or approve the plant's opening. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
In the Ramon crater and the desert of southern Israel, a team of 6, 5 men and 1 woman, have begun simulating what it would be like to live for about a month on Mars.
In the desert of southern Israel, a team of 6 scientists have begun simulating what it might be like to live on Mars. The red-hued Ramon crater will be home for about a month to the 5 men and 1 woman participating in the mission. Their Amadi 20 habitat is tucked beneath a rocky step Inside, they sleep, eat, and conduct experiments. Outside, they wear mock spacesuits fitted with cameras, microphones, and self-contained breathing systems. Dr. Gernot Gromer, the director of the Austrian Space Forum running the project, says the more mistakes they make during the simulation, the better.
We have the motto of fail fast, fail cheap, and have a steep learning curve, because for every mistake we make here on Earth, we hopefully don't repeat it on Mars, because we've done it before.
The Austrian Association is collaborating with the Israel Space Agency and local group D-Mars. The 6 team members are constantly on camera with their vital signs monitored, and their movements inside the habitat are tracked to analyze favorite spots for congregating. 36-year-old Alon Tenzer is on the simulation team.
Yeah, we're 6 people working in tight space under a lot of pressure to do a lot of tasks. There are bound to be challenges, but I trust my crew that we're able to overcome those challenges. We learned how to work together, we trained together, and we're very confident.
Outside, other engineers and specialists will work with a drone and rover to improve autonomous navigation and mapping on a world where GPS is not available. Altogether, they will carry out more than 20 experiments in fields including geology, biology, and medicine, and hope to publish some of the results when finished.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.